Over the past 2 years, trade tensions between the US and China have been at an all-time high. Both sides have fought a trade war with damaging consequences for the global economy. And despite recent hopes that a new deal would be reached between the two economic superpowers, that confidence was detonated on the 5th of May 2019 by a renewed threat by President Donald Trump to impose more tariffs on Chinese imports. Even in the scenario of a provisional agreement eventually being struck, the deep differences in the two countries' economic models and the tensions caused by the ongoing trade war mean their trading relations will be unstable for years to come. While many say the dispute goes well beyond trade, representing a power struggle between two very different worldviews. I'm your host Kasim, and thanks for joining me for another KJ vid. In this video we will give an overview of the roots of the ongoing trade war between the US and China, as well as its latest developments and what they mean for the future of both economies. But just before we begin, please support KJ Vids by subscribing to our membership plan on kjvids.co.uk or joining us on Patreon. Our website has tons of other content and is a useful resource for geopolitical students and enthusiasts. This will also help us keep politically and financially independent. After the People's Republic of China was established by Chinese Communist Party leader Mao Zedong in 1949, the US and China were expected to have limited and mostly hostile relations politically as well as economically. This was realized in the 1950s, as examples of this were the nation's opposing stances in the 1950 Korean War as well as the Taiwan Strait crisis in 1954. The 1970s, however, spelled the beginning of strengthening Sino-US relations and the foundation of the trade ties the two nations developed. In 1972, President Richard Nixon spent 8 days in China, during which he met Chairman Mao Zedong and signed the Shanghai Communique with Premier Zhou Enlai. The Communique set the stage for improved US-Sino relations by allowing China and the United States to discuss difficult issues. Another step forward was taken in 1979 when President Jimmy Carter granted China full diplomatic recognition while acknowledging mainland China's One China principle and severing normal ties with Taiwan. Chinese Vice President Deng Xiaoping, who led China through major economic reforms, visited the United States shortly thereafter. The Reagan administration in the 1980s also worked to improve Beijing-Washington relations at the height of US concerns over Soviet expansionism. President Reagan visited China in April 1984, and in June the same year, the US government permitted Beijing to make purchases of US military equipment. Reagan's and previous administrations' support and stance on Taiwan remained an underlying issue that slowed down this improvement of relations. After the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989, however, where Chinese troops killed hundreds of protesters, the US government suspended military sales to Beijing and freezed relations. This led to a period of uneasy tension between the US and China for much of the 90s. There was a breakthrough at the turn of the century, however, as Bill Clinton signed the US-China Relations Act of 2000, granting Beijing permanent normal trade relations with the United States and paving the way for China to join the World Trade Organization in 2001. As a result of this, by 2006, China surpassed Mexico as the United States' second biggest trade partner after Canada. In September 2008, China surpassed Japan to become the largest holder of US debt or treasuries at around $600 billion. The growing interdependence between the US and Chinese economies became evident as a financial crisis threatened the global economy, fueling concerns over US-China economic imbalances. These concerns became evident by 2012, with a sign of rising trade tensions when in March the United States, the EU and Japan filed a request for consultations with China at the World Trade Organization over its restrictions on exporting rare earth metals. The United States and its allies contended China's quota violated international trade norms, forcing multinational firms that use the metals to relocate to China. China called the move rash and unfair, while vowing to defend its rights in trade disputes. After China's change of leadership in 2012, Xi Jinping redeveloped trade relations with the US and strengthened economic ties, even developing positive relations with Donald Trump. This all changed in March 2018 when Donald Trump's administration announced sweeping tariffs on Chinese imports worth at least $50 billion, in response to what the White House alleged was Chinese theft of US technology and intellectual property, marking the beginning of the US-China trade war. The Trump administration of the United States believes that the Chinese government has implemented mercantilism and has been encouraging exports and restricting imports, which result in a further expansion of the Sino-US trade deficit. However, China believes that the reason for the Sino-US trade deficit is mainly because the United States restricts high-tech products to export to China, rather than the reward and limit policy. China believes the United States is trying to slow down the development of China's high-tech sector by controlling its exports of high-tech products to China. Since China has proposed the Made in China 2025 plan, it is also constantly improving its level of development in high-tech fields. We did a video a couple of months ago on the progress of the China 2025 plan, which you can check out by searching our channel. China has paid more and more attention to the research and development of technology-intensive machinery products, which makes the technical difference between China and the United States decrease gradually. Moreover, the US government has restricted the export of high-tech products and only allowed the export of middle and high-end products, which has promoted the international competition between China and the United States. Furthermore, this trade war is only an economic issue on the surface. Ultimately, this is a political collision between the two countries. Last year, the US imposed tariffs of up to 25% on $250 billion in Chinese goods, from handbags to railway equipment, out of $539 billion in Chinese imports in total. China then followed suit, imposing tariffs on $110 billion worth of goods out of $120 billion in US imports in total. Currently, the US is increasing the pressure by increasing its tariffs up to 25% on virtually all Chinese imports, hitting an additional $300 billion. 2 weeks ago, the United States and China seemed to be gliding towards a trade deal meant to resolve tensions between the world's two largest economies. However, there has since been a breakdown in talks as the United States raised tariffs to 25% on $200 billion of Chinese imports and is threatening to tax an additional $300 billion. The US and China both seem to be standing their ground, refusing to budge in their stances. A part of the reason for this position is that President Donald Trump appears to view continuing tension with China as good for him politically, saying that contrary to the view of the mainstream economists, that tariffs are a reason for the United States' recent economic good fortune. China's leaders have also signalled that many of the concessions that the United States wants would require China to sacrifice core parts of its economic strategy and national sovereignty, in particular its ambitions to lead in the high-tech industries of the future. Furthermore, President Donald Trump issued an executive order on Wednesday barring US companies from using information and communication technology made or controlled by firms that pose a national security risk and declaring a national emergency on the matter. Whilst the order didn't mention any countries or companies in particular, it's clearly aimed at China. More specifically, many are arguing it's aimed at Huawei, the Chinese telecoms and smart manufacturing giant. The White House released a statement saying that the president has made it clear that this administration will do what it takes to keep America safe and prosperous and to protect America from foreign adversaries who are actively and increasingly creating and exploiting vulnerabilities in information and communications technology infrastructure and services. But despite this, Huawei has firmly denied these telling accusations. Its CEO even recently stated that the firm was willing to sign no spy agreements with foreign governments, such as the UK, to ease concerns and open up business. If the escalation now being signalled by both sides goes into force, Americans will face higher prices for a wide range of goods, and certain American manufacturers will face less demand for their products. American farmers are already suffering amid reduced Chinese demands for soybeans and other products. The Chinese manufacturing sector is also hurting as well, and this is likely to suffer further if tariffs reduce American demand for their products or drive relocation of production to other countries. The Sino-US trade war has come to the forefront and the impact is growing. America is China's largest trading partner, so the mutual trade with the United States is of vital importance to China. As the technology race gathers pace, analysts expect the US to continue to use non-tariff measures to push back against China. Restrictions on Chinese investments into the US, limits on the ability of US firms to export technology to China, and further pressure on Chinese companies are all tools that could be used. As it stands, it is difficult to expect a breakthrough anytime soon, but major developments could change the landscape. That's all for today guys, thanks for watching another KJ vid. Please don't forget to support KJ Vids by becoming a member on kjvids.co.uk or sponsoring us on Patreon. Please share your views on the US-China trade war in the comments below. Do you think that this will further escalate and perhaps even result into a war? Or do you think things will de-escalate and eventually turn normal? We would love to hear from you in the comments below, especially if you are Chinese living in the West. We would love to hear your perspective on this. Thanks for watching once again, and see you next time.